The moon hung low over the Afghan desert, a pale ghost watching over a silent land. The air was still, carrying only the whisper of sand shifting against stone. Under the cover of darkness, 5 figures moved like shadows, their gear muted, their breath controlled. Each step was deliberate, rehearsed, disciplined, a rhythm born of countless missions and years of training. Commander Ethan Hayes, leader of SEAL Team Echo 6, paused on a ridge and raised his fist, signaling halt. The rest froze instantly. He lowered his night vision goggles and scanned the valley below, a desolate village littered with the remnants of war. Half-collapsed mud houses stood like broken teeth, and the faint glimmer of metal hinted at buried dangers. This was not a place anyone lingered by choice. "Clear left," whispered Chief Petty Officer Marcus Lane, crouched beside a crumbling wall. "Clear right," replied Ortiz, the youngest of the team, his voice steady but carrying the thin edge of nerves. Hayes glanced at his wristwatch. 200 hours. 2 hours until extraction. The mission was supposed to be simple. Infiltrate, secure the informant codenamed Falcon, and exfil before dawn. The informant claimed to have crucial intel on an insurgent convoy loaded with stolen U.S. weapons. It was a high-stakes lead, and command had deemed it too important to ignore. But simple never existed in a war zone. The SEALs moved through the ruins, weaving between collapsed walls and rusted trucks. Hayes could feel the weight of the desert pressing down on them, that heavy, suffocating silence that often came before something terrible. When they reached the designated house, a low, dome-roofed structure, Hayes motioned for stack formation. Lane moved in first, his rifle sweeping every corner. Ortiz followed with the Combs pack, then Carter and Nash, the team's medic. Hayes brought up the rear, eyes scanning the rooftops for any sign of movement. Inside, the air reeked of smoke and dust. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing cracked walls lined with bullet holes. There, in the corner, crouched a man wrapped in a torn shawl, Falcon. He raised his trembling hands. "Please, I have what you want. But they know you're coming." Hayes's pulse tightened. "Who knows?" "Everyone," Falcon whispered. They set a trap. Before Hayes could respond, the distant rumble of engines rolled across the sand. Then another. Then a third. Lane rushed to the window. Multiple vehicles, coming fast from the north. Hayes cursed under his breath. "They made us?" The team snapped into motion. Nash grabbed Falcon, securing him with a firm grip. "You're coming with us?" Ortiz tried the radio. "Echo 6 to base, we've been compromised, requesting immediate." The rest of his transmission dissolved into static. He adjusted the antenna, banged the side of the unit, tried again. "Echo 6 to base, do you copy?" Nothing. Just the empty hiss of interference. Hayes took the radio from him, toggled the frequency, switched backup channels. Still nothing. No command, no overwatch. Silence. The engines grew louder. "Positions," Hayes ordered. The SEALs took cover, Lane by the window, Ortiz and Carter behind overturned furniture, Nash in the far corner with Falcon. Through his goggles, Hayes could see lights approaching in the distance. Trucks, maybe 6 or 7, moving fast. Dust clouds billowed behind them. The first shots came seconds later. Tracer rounds sliced through the night sky, streaks of red like falling comets. Bullets smashed into the walls, sending shards of brick flying. The team returned fire, each burst controlled and precise. Multiple hostiles, 200 meters out. Lane shouted, "Suppress and move. We're not dying in this damn house." Hayes barked. They broke for the southern wall, blowing a hole through it with a small breach-in charge. The explosion lit up the street, just enough to reveal what awaited outside. Dozens of armed insurgents, poured in from every direction. Contact left. Ortiz yelled, firing 3 quick shots and ducking as debris exploded beside him. The SEALs fought their way through the maze of alleys, covering each other with military precision. But for every enemy they dropped, 2 more seemed to appear. The air filled with a deafening roar of gunfire, dust, and shouts in a language none of them could understand, but all recognized, the voice of fury and hate. They ducked behind a burned-out vehicle. Hayes grabbed his radio again. Echo 6 to base. This is an SOS. We're under heavy fire. Coordinates. A bullet tore through the radio's antenna, knocking it from his hand. Static. Lane reloaded his weapon, breathing hard. We're cut off. Completely. Hayes looked around at his men. Sweat, dust, and exhaustion etched into their faces. They were trained for this, built for this. But something in his gut whispered that this time they might not make it out. All right, Hayes said, forcing calm into his tone. We fall back to the ridge. Hold position until sunrise. Maybe command's just jammed out. Or dead, Ortiz muttered under his breath. Nobody replied. They moved again, staying low. The night had become a symphony of chaos. Gunfire, distant screams, the hum of engines. Every shadow looked like a threat. Hayes could taste the metallic tongue of adrenaline on his tongue. When they reached the ridge, the firing had stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before. The desert stretched endlessly under the cold moonlight. No rescue, no reinforcements. No sound but their own breathing. Lane collapsed against a rock, reloading what little ammo remained. This is bad, boss. Hayes crouched beside him, scanning the valley below. He could still see the flicker of headlights in the distance, moving slowly now, like predators circling their prey. We'll set a perimeter here, Hayes said. Rest in shifts. Keep eyes open. The team nodded silently. As the hours dragged on, fatigue began to take its toll. Ortiz dozed for a moment, then jolted awake at every gust of wind. Nash tended to a graze on Carter's arm, his hands shaking slightly. Falcon sat in the dirt, head bowed, whispering prayers in Arabic. Hayes stood alone on the ridge, the wind tugging at his scarf. He stared into the darkness, feeling its weight pressing against his chest. He pulled the broken radio from his vest, turning the dial one last time. Echo 6 to anyone reading this frequency, he said softly. We are pinned, low on ammo, 2 wounded. Requesting immediate support. Static answered. He stared at the stars, cold, distant, indifferent. Somewhere out there, satellites watched, drones circled, generals slept in air-conditioned rooms. But here, in this strip of no man's land, Echo 6 was invisible, forgotten. Hayes looked back at his men, his brothers. Every one of them had families waiting, faces he'd seen in photos tucked in body armor or taped to weapon cases. He couldn't let this be their end. Get some rest, he told them. We move at dawn. Lane smirked wearily. If we see dawn. Hayes didn't answer. He just gripped his rifle tighter and looked back at the horizon, where the faint glow of enemy headlights still flickered, like hungry eyes in the dark. And then, faintly, from somewhere in the night, came the sound of a single shot, distant, sharp, precise. The men froze. Hayes lifted his head, heart pounding. That wasn't insurgent fire. That was something else. A trained shot, military. But from who? The desert wind carried no answer, only the echo of that single gunshot fading into silence. Somewhere out there, someone was watching. And for the first time in hours, Hayes felt the smallest spark of hope, or dread. He wasn't sure which. The first explosion ripped through the night like thunder. Hayes's ears rang as the walls of a nearby compound shuddered from the blast. The SEALs scattered instinctively, training guiding their movements even as adrenaline pushed panic against their discipline. Dust and debris swirled around them, filling their nostrils, coating their lungs. The desert night had erupted into a hellscape of fire and gunfire. "Move! Move!" Hayes shouted, dragging Ortiz toward cover behind a fractured wall. Sparks from incoming rounds ignited the sand around them. Shadows flickered violently under the pale moonlight, and the distant hum of engines told them the enemy had not yet finished their hunt. Lane returned fire with controlled bursts, aiming at the glowing outlines of insurgents advancing through the rubble. Each shot was deliberate, each breath calculated, but the enemy's numbers seemed endless. The SEALs were outnumbered, outgunned, and caught in a trap far larger than they had anticipated. Ortiz ducked behind a half-collapsed doorway, firing 3 quick rounds at a figure advancing through the smoke. The insurgent dropped, but others rushed forward, bullets cutting through the air. "They've got us pinned," Ortiz yelled, panic threading his voice, though he didn't break. "Hold your ground," Hayes ordered, voice sharp and commanding. "Suppressing fire only. Don't waste ammo." The team pressed against the walls, their rifles stuttering in bursts that echoed across the ruins. Nash dragged Falcon to relative safety behind a toppled truck. The informant was pale, trembling, and muttering prayers in Arabic, eyes wide with terror. His intel, crucial moments ago, now seemed a distant shadow of hope. Suddenly, a figure darted across an open street. Tracer fire lit the sand like fireflies, and Lane cursed as rounds kicked up near his boots. Hayes lifted his scope and tracked the enemy 3 fighters moving in coordination, flanking their position. A grenade arced through the night sky, landing dangerously close. Hayes dove forward, slamming it into a sandbag, the explosion shaking the earth beneath them. "Status," Hayes barked, adrenaline sharpening every nerve. "2 hits, Nash said grimly, checking Carter's arm. "Minor, but they're bleeding. Ammo's low." Hayes exhaled slowly, forcing calm into his voice. "We can't stay here. We move or we die." The SEALs scrambled across the broken street, keeping low, every movement precise despite fatigue gnawing at their muscles. Bullets whistled over their heads, kicking up dust that choked their lungs. Hayes led, scanning every shadow, listening for the faintest shift of enemy movement. The trucks that had chased them earlier were gone, replaced by scattered insurgents, now hunting them like predators scenting fear. They reached a narrow alley flanked by burned-out vehicles. Hayes signaled for them to stack up, scanning the rooftops. It was a deadly choke point, but it offered cover. Lane took point. Ortiz followed with the radio, Nash in the middle with Falcon, and Carter brought up the rear. Hayes covered the formation from the flank, eyes darting from shadow to shadow. "Echo 6 to base," Hayes tried again, voice almost drowned by the storm of gunfire. "We are pinned down at coordinates, requesting immediate extraction. Static. Silence." A sudden explosion rocked the alley as a hidden IED detonated near the SEALs. Ortiz went flying, hitting the ground hard, ears ringing. Hayes grabbed him, checking for movement. "Ortiz!" "I'm fine, sir," Ortiz coughed, voice trembling. Just some dust and pain." Hayes nodded, knowing the young man's stoicism masked fear. There wasn't time for hesitation. The enemy was relentless. They had planned this ambush with precision. Every movement, every shadow seemed calculated to keep them in this alley, exposed and vulnerable. A burst of fire from the rooftop rained down. Lane answered, returning fire until his weapon overheated, smoke curling from the barrel. Nash moved to provide covering fire, but every second they spent pinned down risked more casualties. "Fall back to the intersection," Hayes ordered. "Move, move, move." The SEALs shifted, sprinting through the alley. Bullets tore the walls around them. Dust stung their eyes. Falcon screamed, untrained in war, terrified and helpless. Hayes grabbed him by the collar, pulling him down, whispering reassurances in a calm, steady tone he didn't entirely feel. Outside the alley, the intersection opened like a battlefield, painted in shadows and moonlight. Enemy fighters emerged from the darkness, cutting off their route. Hayes ducked behind a toppled pickup, reloading, calculating. They had to survive this moment, or the night would claim them all. Lane covered the right flank, Ortiz the left. Carter and Nash moved toward the center, creating a crossfire that gave the SEALs a fleeting advantage. Hayes scanned the distance with night vision, spotting movement 3 insurgents advancing with practiced coordination. He pressed the radio again, hope rising and falling like a tide. Echo 6 to base. This is an SOS. Coordinates static. Hayes cursed under his breath, his voice harsh with frustration. No one was coming. The extraction was delayed, or worse, unaware. They were truly alone. The SEALs fell into a crouched perimeter, using every scrap of cover they could find. Bullets splintered wood, ricocheted off metal, and shredded sandbags. Every breath brought the taste of gunpowder and fear. Hayes's mind raced. They had to survive the night until extraction, or figure a way to escape on their own. Ortiz whispered, voice trembling. "Sir, maybe. Maybe no one's out there anymore." Hayes didn't answer immediately. He knew the young SEAL's words weren't defeatism, but acknowledgement of reality. Command might have abandoned them. The chaos might have swallowed their SOS, or they could already be considered casualties in someone's report. Hayes checked the men Lane scanning left, Carter and Nash covering the rear, Ortiz gripping his rifle like it was the only lifeline. Falcon huddled in Nash's arms, eyes wide and terrified. Hayes exhaled slowly. "No," he finally said. "Someone's listening. They have to be. And if they're not, we survive anyway." The sound came then, faint, almost imperceptible, cutting through the storm of gunfire. A single sharp click of a rifle in the distance. Hayes froze. Every man followed his gaze, scanning the darkness. Did anyone hear that?" Ortiz asked. Hayes nodded slowly. "Yeah, someone's out there. Not them." The team fell silent, adrenaline mingling with awe and confusion. Whoever was firing wasn't part of the enemy. Every shot that followed was precise, surgical, cutting down insurgents with deadly efficiency. One by one, the attackers fell, some screaming, some silent, as if the night itself had taken vengeance upon them. Lane exhaled, lowering his weapon. Who's doing that?" Hayes didn't answer. He only stared into the darkness, eyes scanning, pulse hammering in his chest. Someone had answered their SOS. Not command, not extraction, but a lone warrior in the shadows. For the first time that night, hope flickered. And with it, a new question. Who was this phantom sniper, and how far would he go to save them? The night had grown heavier, oppressive, as if the desert itself held its breath. Echo 6 huddled behind a broken wall, their silhouettes barely distinguishable in the dim moonlight. Dust clung to every inch of their gear. Sweat and blood streaked across faces etched with fatigue. The air was tense, broken only by the intermittent crackle of distant gunfire and the occasional, deliberate echo of the mysterious rifle shots from somewhere in the darkness. Hayes pressed his back against the wall, radio in hand. Echo 6 to base. We're pinned down at coordinates requesting immediate extraction. He barked into the static. His voice cracked slightly. 2 wounded, low on ammo, heavy enemy presence. Repeat, SOS, nothing. Static swallowed the message. Hayes slammed the radio to the ground, frustration tightening his jaw. The combs had failed them when they needed them most. His eyes scanned the horizon again, trying to catch the faint glow of headlights or movement that might signal friendly forces. None appeared. "Sir?" Ortiz's voice trembled slightly. It's like we're invisible. No one's out there. Maybe. Maybe no one's coming." Hayes didn't immediately answer. He felt a cold weight press on his chest, a mixture of fear, anger, and disbelief. He forced a slow, controlled exhale, masking panic beneath layers of discipline. "We survive anyway. That's what we do. We hold until daylight, and then we find a way out." The SEALs adjusted positions, creating a makeshift perimeter with limited cover. Nash pressed himself close to Falcon, murmuring soft reassurances that the informant didn't fully understand. Carter checked weapons and magazines, distributing what little they had left. Every man felt the bite of exhaustion, every fiber of their bodies screaming for rest, yet none dared loosen their vigilance. Minutes stretched into hours, each second a test of patience, each shadow a potential death sentence. The enemy didn't relent. Occasional shouts and bursts of gunfire echoed through the ruins. It was relentless, organized, and calculated to break them. Hayes wiped dust from his goggles and scanned the far ridges. That's when he saw it, a faint glimmer, a reflection in the darkness, too precise to be random. Then came the first shot, a single sharp pop that resonated across the sand. The nearest insurgent fell instantly, blood spattering the ground. Another followed, and then another. Lane's mouth went dry. "Sir, those shots, they're precise. Not ours, not theirs. Someone else." Hayes's pulse quickened. He pressed closer to the ground, eyes searching. The sniper's shots were calculated, deadly, and coming from different angles. It was impossible to tell where they were, as if a ghost had entered the battlefield. "Maybe it's a ghost," Ortiz muttered under his breath. Hayes shook his head. "Someone's watching. Someone's saving us. Don't get distracted. Move when I say." The team tightened formation, moving through the alleyways with cautious precision. Hayes motioned for Lane to cover the left flank, Ortiz the right, Carter and Nash moving toward the center. Every step was measured, every sound amplified in the silent desert night. Falcon whimpered quietly, shaking. "They'll kill us," he murmured, voice barely audible. "No," Nash said firmly, gripping his shoulder. "Not tonight. Stay down, stay quiet, breathe. We've got people watching." Hayes signaled the team forward, toward a partially collapsed compound that offered better cover. Bullets tore past them, kicking up dust and shards of brick. Hayes counted every step, every movement. Survival depended on control and timing. When they reached the compound, Hayes crouched low, peering through a crack in the wall. The enemy forces were reorganizing, regrouping for another assault. Vehicles lined up on the horizon, their headlights piercing the darkness like predatory eyes. It was clear the insurgents planned to finish this. Hayes tried the radio one more time. "Echo 6 to base, we're pinned coordinates, repeated, need extraction immediately." Static. He slammed the radio down, frustration and despair coiling in his stomach. His men were exhausted, wounded, yet disciplined. Yet the reality was unavoidable. If help didn't arrive soon, they might not make it. Then, again, a shot cracked through the night closer this time. The insurgent nearest to the SEALs went down instantly. Another followed. The pattern was meticulous, surgical. The phantom sniper was thinning their ranks from the darkness, buying Echo 6 precious seconds. Hayes whispered to his men, his voice low but firm. "That's our lifeline. Move when he fires. Cover each other. Every shot he takes gives us a chance." Lane peeked over the wall, scanning the ridges. His He's good. Too good. A professional. Ortiz swallowed hard. Who is he? Hayes didn't answer. He only stared into the dark, trying to locate the source, but the sniper remained invisible, a specter in the night. The hours dragged on. The SEALs rotated positions, keeping Falcon protected, firing only when necessary, conserving their dwindling ammunition. Hayes calculated every movement, every angle, every possibility. Night had stretched into an endless struggle, but each precise shot from the unknown sniper bolstered their hope. They were still alive, still moving. At one point, Hayes noticed movement near the horizon, not coastal, not clearly friend, but careful, controlled. The sniper's position shifted slightly, a phantom silhouette disappearing behind a broken tower. The realization hit Hayes. Someone had chosen this moment to intervene, without orders, without acknowledgement. Hayes muttered under his breath, "Thank you, whoever you are." Falcon, sensing the shift in the battlefield, clung tighter to Nash. Is someone helping us? Yes, Hayes said quietly. Someone is out there. Someone is watching. Hours passed, the tension unrelenting. The team took turns resting briefly, leaning against rubble, never letting guard down. Each rustle of sand, each distant engine, each shadow across the moonlit ruins set their nerves on edge. Then the radio crackled, just a faint pop, barely audible over the wind. Hayes grabbed it instantly. Echo 6. Hang tight. A deep, calm voice said. Help is inbound. Stay put, stay silent. The voice was unfamiliar, professional, cold, but precise. The SEALs froze. Not command. Not base. Someone else. Hayes whispered to his men. Copy that. Hold positions. Do not move until I say. Ortiz swallowed hard, eyes wide. Sir, who is that? Hayes shook his head. I don't know, but he just bought us more time. Trust him. Trust the shots. From the darkness, another volley of bullets tore into the insurgents. One by one, attackers fell, confusion spreading among them. The sniper was clearing a path, each shot deliberate, each kill precise. Hayes felt a surge of relief, fragile and fleeting. For the first time since the ambush began, he allowed himself to believe survival was possible. But the questions remained. Who was this mysterious savior? How far would he go to protect them? And when daylight came, would they even be able to find him? Or would he vanish as silently as he had appeared? For now, the SEALs hunkered down, waiting, breathing, living, clinging to the thin thread of hope offered by a lone sniper in the night. The desert night pressed in on Echo 6, like a living thing, cold, silent, and unforgiving. Hours had passed since the ambush, and the SEALs were stretched to their limits. Fatigue gnawed at their muscles, dehydration clawed at their throats, and the weight of unrelenting danger hung heavy on their minds. Even Falcon, wrapped in Nash's arms, had grown pale with exhaustion. Hayes scanned the horizon again, heart pounding, searching for movement. The sniper's shots had slowed the enemy's advance, but they had not ended it. Trucks still rumbled in the distance, and insurgents regrouped, communicating in harsh shouts that echoed across the empty valley. Their numbers were overwhelming, their determination unrelenting. Hayes knew time was running out. Sir, they're still out there, Ortiz whispered, voice tight. He hugged his rifle, knuckles white, eyes darting at every shadow. How do we survive this? We survive by holding together, Hayes replied firmly, forcing calm. His own voice betrayed none of the uncertainty clawing at his chest. Keep your heads down, conserve ammo, and trust the shots. Someone's out there. Nash glanced at Falcon, murmuring soft reassurances in Arabic. The informant, terrified and exhausted, leaned against the rubble, praying quietly. His whispers were barely audible, yet Hayes caught the edge of fear in each syllable. The enemy launched another assault, this time from the east. Bullets tore through the walls of their makeshift cover, sending shards of stone and sand into the SEALs' faces. Lane fired back, suppressing as best he could. Carter covered the rear, picking off insurgents advancing from the shadows. Every shot was calculated, each breath measured. Hayes checked ammunition. Low, too low. Every magazine counted. Every round fired could mean the difference between life and death. Hold fire unless absolutely necessary, he ordered. Wait for the shot that counts. A sharp pop cut through the chaos. An insurgent advancing on the ridge fell in a spray of sand and dust. Another followed. Hayes looked up, heart hammering. The sniper was back in position, precise, lethal, unseen. Lane lowered his weapon slightly, awe in his eyes. He's incredible. Too good to be. Human. Hayes said nothing. He only nodded, focusing on the perimeter. Every second the sniper bought them was another second they might survive. Hours passed in a tense rhythm. The SEALs rotated positions, hunkered down behind the ruins, breathing quietly. The wind shifted, carrying the distant rumble of enemy engines. Hayes glanced at the horizon. Dawn was hours away. Each passing minute stretched longer than the last, every second a test of patience and nerves. Falcon shivered in Nash's arms. "Please help," he whispered. Hayes didn't answer. Words were useless. Only action could keep them alive. Then, from somewhere in the distance, a faint voice crackled through the static of a handheld radio. Hayes grabbed it immediately. Echo 6. Hang tight. Help is inbound. Stay put, stay silent, said a deep, calm voice. Professional, cold, precise. Not command. Not base. Someone else. Hayes pressed the radio to his ear, heart racing. Who is this? The voice remained silent for a moment, then replied, "Just call me Reaper." The team froze. Reaper, a single word, carrying weight, menace, and promise all at once. Hayes's mind raced. Who was he? Why was he here? And most importantly, would he be enough to save them? The first shot rang out moments later. A sniper's bullet found its mark, taking down a machine gunner trying to flank them. Another followed, and another. The insurgents fell back, panic spreading like wildfire through their ranks. Reaper was cleaning a path for Echo 6, moving like a shadow, striking with precision, and vanishing before anyone could locate him. Hayes motioned for the team to advance. Each step was deliberate. Each move was synchronized with Reaper's shots. The SEALs crept toward the next ridge, every nerve on edge, every breath shallow. Hours blurred together. Fatigue pressed like a heavy stone on their shoulders. Blood and dust caked their faces. Every muscle ached. Every heartbeat carried the threat of death. Yet the sniper's presence gave them hope, a fragile thread in the endless night. Ortiz whispered, voice trembling. "He's saving us. Why?" Hayes didn't answer. He didn't need to. Actions spoke louder than words, and the pattern was clear. Reaper was willing to risk everything for them, unseen, unknown, and unacknowledged. The enemy launched another coordinated assault. This time, they attempted to trap the SEALs between 2 points, cutting off their escape route. Hayes scanned the terrain, calculating angles, distances, and cover. He whispered instructions, keeping his team moving, minimizing exposure. Each SEAL moved like a shadow, trusting the sniper's cover and their own training. Another shot split the night. An enemy truck exploded, a cloud of fire illuminating the valley in brief, horrifying brilliance. Hayes felt a surge of hope, quickly tempered by reality. there was still no guarantee they would survive. Minutes stretched into hours, the team moving like ghosts, their senses stretched to the breaking point. Hayes checked on every man. Minor injuries were bandaged. Ammo distributed. The informant clutched Nash's vest like a lifeline. Every life counted. Every movement could mean death. At one point, a sniper bullet struck dangerously close, kicking up sand beside Hayes. His heart raced. He peered into the distance, seeing only shadows. Reaper had vanished again, unseen, untouchable, a ghost walking between life and death. By the time the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, the enemy had slowed. Confusion reigned among them, their ranks thinning under Reaper's relentless precision. Hayes allowed himself a brief glance at his men. They were battered, exhausted, and bloodied, but alive. Reaper's shots had given them a chance to survive, to see the sun rise over the desert, to live another day. The team hunkered down, catching a moment of respite, hearts pounding in synchrony with the rising light. Hayes knew the night wasn't over. Extraction was still hours away. The enemy could return. And Reaper, their phantom savior, remained unseen. Yet for the first time since the ambush, he allowed himself a small spark of hope. Somewhere out there, in the ruins, a lone sniper moved like a shadow, his rifle singing death into the night. An Echo 6, battered and broken, clung to the fragile lifeline he had provided. As the sun's first rays touched the desert sands, Hayes whispered to himself, "We survive, and we remember." The longest night had not ended. But for the SEALs of Echo 6, the dawn carried a promise. They were still alive, still fighting, and the unseen Reaper had bought them the chance to see another day. The desert air was still sharp, biting at the exposed skin of Echo 6 as the first rays of dawn stretched across the ruins. The SEALs were battered, bleeding, and exhausted, but somehow still alive. Their eyes swept every shadow, every broken wall, every jagged outline of sand and stone. The night had been merciless, yet a single presence had shifted the balance in their favor. A phantom in the darkness. A sniper, a savior, Reaper. Hayes crouched behind a toppled wall, checking each man. Lane had a graze on his shoulder. Carter's hand was bleeding from shrapnel. Nash's knees ached from holding Falcon tightly for hours. Ortiz, the youngest, barely kept his head up, his face smeared with sweat and dust. They had endured the impossible. And now they waited. Reaper moved through the ruins like a shadow, every step calculated, silent, precise. He had no official orders. No one had sent him. Yet here he was, picking apart insurgents with surgical efficiency, shifting positions after every shot, leaving no trace behind. Hayes had glimpsed him only in flashes silver of a rifle barrel, a faint glint in the distance, a silhouette vanishing into darkness. And each time, the enemy's numbers dwindled. "Sir," Ortiz whispered, voice trembling. "Who is he? How can one man do all this?" Hayes didn't answer. Words were meaningless. Actions spoke louder. He only nodded toward the distant ridge, where another shot cracked through the morning air, silencing an enemy fighter attempting to flank them. The SEALs moved as one, covering each other, using Reaper's interventions to navigate the battlefield. Every step forward was lethal. Every angle was a potential death trap. The sniper's timing was impeccable, forcing insurgents to retreat, to hesitate, to scatter. It was as if the desert itself had a guardian, one who struck only from the shadows. "Move," Hayes whispered. "Stick to cover. Follow my lead." Reapers watching. Lane took point, rifle raised. Ortiz stayed close, eyes darting at every flicker of movement. Carter and Nash formed the rear guard, ensuring Falcon remained protected. Hayes scanned the horizon, calculating every possible threat. His heartbeat thrummed with urgency. Extraction was still hours away, and every step was a gamble. Suddenly, a truck roared around a bend, carrying heavily armed insurgents. Hayes froze. Lane crouched lower, eyes widening. The vehicle mounted the ridge, its occupants trained to hunt, to kill, to overwhelm. Then, the first shot rang out calm, precise, deadly. The truck's driver slumped over, and the vehicle swerved wildly, crashing into the sand. The SEALs exhaled, barely able to believe what had just happened. "Reaper," Hayes muttered under his breath. "He's real, and he's saving us." Another shot struck the insurgent closest to the SEALs, taking him down before he could raise his weapon. Each bullet was a lifeline, each death a step toward survival. Reaper was buying them time, turning the battlefield in their favor, and yet remained invisible, untouchable, a ghost among the ruins. Hayes signaled the team forward, toward higher ground that offered better cover and a clearer path to extraction. Every SEAL moved cautiously, synchronizing steps with the sniper's shots. Every time an enemy advanced, Reaper's rifle spoke. Ortiz leaned against a shattered wall, voice trembling. "Sir, he's amazing. He's unstoppable." Hayes didn't respond. Instead, he focused on movement, scanning for threats. The desert had become a chessboard of sand, stone, and blood, and every move had consequences measured in seconds, in heartbeats. Hours passed in a tense rhythm. The SEALs advanced slowly, pausing behind every wall, every ruin, every shadow. Reaper shifted positions continuously, each shot eliminating threats, forcing insurgents to scatter, creating openings the SEALs could exploit. Hayes observed, noting the sniper's precision, timing, and pattern. Whoever he was trained beyond anything they had ever encountered. A ghost in the night, a force untethered by rank or command. Then, a group of insurgents attempted to flank from the east. Hayes froze. Lane adjusted his rifle, ready to fire. Carter and Nash moved to block the path. But before they could engage, 2 precise shots rang out. The first insurgent fell silently. The second followed. The flank was neutralized before it had begun. "Too precise," Lane muttered, shaking his head. He's not even human." Hayes allowed a small, grim smile. "Human or not, he's on our side. And for now, that's enough." The team pressed forward, finally reaching a small ridge that overlooked the extraction point. They crouched low, surveying the landscape. The enemy forces were scattered, regrouping in confusion. Reaper had systematically thinned their ranks, guiding Echo 6 through a gauntlet that had seemed impossible to survive. Falcon looked at Hayes, eyes wide. He's saving us?" "Yes," Hayes replied quietly. "And we survived because of him." The SEALs caught a brief moment of rest, leaning against rocks, catching their breath, reloading weapons. The first light of dawn cast long shadows across the sand, revealing the devastation the night had wrought. Bodies of insurgents lay scattered, vehicles abandoned, smoke rising from burning debris. And somewhere, unseen, Reaper watched, covering their movements, a silent guardian in the chaos. Hayes checked his team, each man battered but alive. Ortiz leaned on Lane, exhaustion written across his face. Carter's hands were blistered from repeated firing. Nash tended to Falcon, whose knees were scraped and bloodied from the night's terror. Hayes himself felt the weight of responsibility pressing down, but hope, fragile and precious, had returned. Reaper fired again, picking off a lone sniper hidden on a distant ridge. Hayes exhaled slowly, feeling a mixture of awe and relief. The sniper had bought them hours, bought them life. The enemy no longer held the advantage. Hayes finally allowed himself a small measure of trust. "We move to extraction," he ordered. "Stick together. Follow cover. Every step counts. Lane glanced at the horizon. Sir, will he be with us? Hayes shook his head. He's a ghost. That's all we know. But he's saved our lives. That's enough. The team moved cautiously toward the extraction point, Reaper covering every movement, systematically eliminating threats. Each shot, each precise kill, was a lifeline. The SEALs felt a mixture of fear and awe survival, dependent on a man they could not see, a force untouchable, existing only in the shadows of war. Finally, after hours of deadly precision, Reaper fired his last shot for the moment, a final strike that scattered the remaining insurgents. The battlefield fell silent, save for the faint hum of distant engines and the ragged breathing of Echo 6. Hayes glanced back at the ridge, where the sniper had been. Nothing. No sign. No trace. Only the ghostly presence that had protected them through the deadliest night of their lives. Falcon whispered, trembling. He's gone? Hayes nodded. For now. But he's out there somewhere. Watching, waiting, protecting. As the SEALs prepared for the final approach to the extraction point, Hayes allowed himself a rare thought. Someone had answered their SOS when no one else would. Someone had stepped into the night, unseen, and turned the tide. And for that, they would survive. The sniper's arrival had changed everything. The impossible had become possible. And for Echo 6, the nightmare of the night had finally shifted into the first rays of hope. The sun had barely risen, painting the Afghan desert in harsh hues of gold and red, yet the battlefield still carried the echoes of the night's chaos. Dust and smoke lingered in the air, clinging to every surface, coating the SEALs' uniforms and weapons. Their breaths came shallow and ragged, hearts pounding from the hours of relentless combat. But the enemy wasn't finished. The scattered insurgents were regrouping, desperate, wary, and furious. Hayes signaled his team to move toward a small ridge, a vantage point that provided better cover and a clear line to the extraction zone. Every step was calculated, every movement synchronized with Reaper's unseen precision. The sniper had been with them throughout the night, systematically thinning the enemy ranks, buying Echo 6 precious time, and now they depended on him more than ever. Lane led the movement, crouched low, scanning for threats, while Ortiz followed closely, still visibly shaken, but maintaining focus. Nash remained vigilant over Falcon, who had been silent since the last firefight, his fear now mingled with awe at the unseen protector. Carter covered the rear, scanning shadows for signs of renewed enemy activity. Hayes moved along the flank, eyes scanning rooftops, ruined walls, and distant ridges for movement. Then it began again. A single rifle shot cracked across the desert, precise and deliberate. An enemy fighter attempting to reposition dropped instantly. Another followed. The SEALs froze, listening. Every shot from Reaper was calculated, designed, not only to eliminate a threat, but to control the battlefield, to manipulate the enemy's movements. The insurgents hesitated, unsure where the next shot would come from, their confidence shattered. Hayes whispered to his team, "Move now. Stick to cover. Follow the shots. He's buying us every second." The SEALs advanced in tight formation, using every piece of rubble, every shadow, every fallen vehicle as cover. Reaper moved silently across the ruins, shifting his position after every shot, leaving no discernible trace. His presence felt only through the sudden, lethal precision of his rifle. Hayes marveled at his skill. This wasn't a man following orders. This was a force of nature, methodical, patient, and deadly. Ortiz, breathing hard, whispered, "Sir, he's unstoppable. How can one man do this?" Hayes didn't answer. He only nodded toward a distant ridge where Reaper had just eliminated another enemy sniper attempting to ambush them. The SEALs knew enough. Their survival depended on this man, this ghost, this Reaper. Hours passed in this deadly rhythm. Every movement was covered by the sniper, every threat neutralized before it could endanger the team. Hayes observed the patterns. The sniper anticipated the enemy's strategies, calculated angles, and executed with mechanical precision. Each shot created openings, controlled chaos, and allowed Echo 6 to maneuver toward safety. The enemy, once bold and aggressive, was now fractured and fearful. Their attacks became sporadic, uncoordinated. The insurgents had realized too late that they were being hunted, not just the SEALs, but by a ghost that appeared and disappeared at will. Panic began to ripple through their ranks, their confidence dissolving in the face of an unseen enemy. Hayes signaled for the team to move toward the next ridge, closer to the extraction point. Every step was perilous. Every moment carried the possibility of death. Reaper's shots echoed behind them, guiding, protecting, hunting. Hayes glanced at Falcon, who had begun to whisper prayers, not only of fear, but of gratitude. Then, a sudden burst of gunfire erupted from a distant ridge. A squad of insurgents, believing the SEALs were vulnerable, had attempted to flank them. Hayes froze, heart racing. Lane and Carter returned fire, but the enemy was too numerous. And then, the familiar crack of Reaper's rifle. One by one, the insurgents fell, each shot precise, each death a calculated maneuver to protect the SEALs. Reaper shifted positions, his movements undetectable, yet every strike lethal. He was everywhere and nowhere, a predator moving through the ruins with uncanny precision. Hayes whispered almost in awe, "He's not just covering us. He's hunting them." The SEALs pressed forward, adrenaline pushing them beyond exhaustion. They moved like ghosts themselves, synchronized, disciplined, relying on Reaper to cover every angle, every potential threat. The sniper's rhythm was now the heartbeat of their survival. Each shot a signal, each kill a lifeline. Ortiz glanced back at the ridge where Reaper had fired last. "Sir, if he's this good, why aren't we seeing him?" Hayes shook his head. "That's how he works. He's a ghost. He doesn't need recognition, and he certainly doesn't need us to see him. What matters is he's keeping us alive." The SEALs reached a small cluster of ruins that provided temporary cover. Hayes checked his team. Minor injuries were being managed. Their ammunition was dangerously low, but their discipline held. They were still alive because of Reaper, and that knowledge was both reassuring and terrifying. They were dependent on a man they had never met, a force as deadly as the desert night itself. Another group of insurgents attempted to regroup and take the high ground. Hayes and Lane exchanged quick glances. Carter and Nash were ready to cover. But before they could engage, two quick, deliberate shots rang out. Two insurgents collapsed, no chance to fire. The remaining enemy hesitated, fear spreading through their ranks. Reaper had again controlled the battlefield without being seen. Hayes allowed himself a small exhale of relief. "Move," he whispered. "We're almost there." The SEALs navigated through the ruins, using every bit of cover, every shadow, every distraction created by Reaper. The sniper shots were no longer just protective. They were proactive. Anticipating enemy movements, setting traps, manipulating the battlefield, and giving Echo 6 a chance to survive when survival seemed impossible. By late morning, the SEALs had advanced to a ridge overlooking the extraction zone. Enemy forces were scattered, demoralized, and confused. Reaper had systematically dismantled their offensive, moving through the ruins like a phantom. Hayes glanced back at the terrain. They had crossed bodies of insurgents, abandoned vehicles, smoke rising from scattered fires. And somewhere, unseen, Reaper continued his hunt, a silent guardian ensuring that every step they took toward safety was protected. Falcon whispered, trembling, He saved us." "Yes," Hayes said softly. "And we live because of him." Remember that. The team took a brief moment to regroup, reload, and prepare for the final push. Their hearts still raced, bodies still ached, yet hope had returned, fragile but real. Reaper's presence had turned an impossible nightmare into a possible escape. Every shot, every movement, every calculated strike had bought them the chance to survive. Hayes knew that when the extraction arrived, they might never see him, never know him, never thank him. But Echo 6 would never forget the man who had hunted the shadows, saved them from certain death, and vanished into the desert like a ghost. Reaper fired once more, striking a lone insurgent, attempting a final desperate assault. The battlefield fell silent, save for the shallow breaths of Echo 6 and the distant hum of approaching extraction helicopters. Hayes looked at his team, battered but alive. "Let's finish this," he said quietly. "Move to extraction." They advanced carefully, guided by the sniper's unseen presence. Every step was covered, every threat neutralized, every moment a testament to Reaper's deadly skill. The SEALs knew they owed their lives to this unseen guardian, this shadow in the ruins, this hunter who had turned the tide of the night. And as they approached the extraction zone, Hayes allowed himself one thought. No matter who he was, no matter why he had intervened, Reaper had become the difference between life and death. And for Echo 6, that difference was everything. The first true light of day broke over the Afghan desert, painting the ruins in pale gold and deep shadows. After a night of relentless chaos, the battlefield was quiet but tense. Echo 6 had survived the ambush, thanks entirely to a ghostly savior known only as Reaper. Now, extraction helicopters were en route, their distant rotors audible as faint thumps over the still silent sand. Hayes crouched behind a partially collapsed wall, scanning the horizon with weary eyes. His team Lane, Ortiz, Nash, Carter, and Falcon huddled behind rubble, each soldier battered, bloodied, and exhausted, yet alive. The adrenaline that had driven them through the night still pulsed in their veins. "Stay sharp," Hayes whispered. "Extraction isn't a guarantee." Not yet. The insurgents were scattered, but not gone. Some remained, hiding among ruins, seeking any opportunity to take a final shot. Reaper's unseen presence had thinned their ranks, but he had not eliminated them all. Hayes knew the last stretch would be the most dangerous. Lane peered over a wall, rifle raised. "Sir, I don't see anyone left worth shooting at. Just shadows." Hayes shook his head. "Shadows are the problem. Enemy can hide anywhere. Move carefully." The team began their slow, careful approach to the extraction point, a small clearing visible in the distance. Each step was deliberate, each movement synchronized. Hayes counted every heartbeat, measured every breath. One misstep could mean death. Then, a sudden crack of a rifle echoed from a distant ridge. Hayes froze. An insurgent had survived and attempted a last-minute attack. Reaper answered instantly. A single precise shot rang out, striking the enemy dead before he could fire again. Hayes felt a surge of relief. The sniper was still with them, unseen, lethal, protecting every movement. "Move," Hayes whispered. "Stick together. Every cover counts." The SEALs advanced through the ruins, dust rising with every step. Bullets kicked up sand near them, but Reaper's interventions made sure none found their mark. Each shot from the unseen sniper was not only protection but also intimidation, a silent message to the remaining insurgents. This battlefield was controlled by a force they could neither see nor escape. Hours of tension stretched into what felt like an eternity. The extraction helicopters grew louder, their rotors chopping the air with a steady, mechanical rhythm. Hayes signaled for the team to move toward the clearing, the final stretch of their dangerous journey. Falcon clutched Nash tightly, eyes wide. "Will we make it?" "Yes," Hayes said quietly, though even he didn't fully believe it. We've survived this far. Stay with me. Move fast. Cover each other. As they approached the open clearing, the first helicopter came into view, rotor-wash kicking up clouds of sand. The enemy opened fire, attempting a last desperate attack. Hayes and his team dropped low, firing only when necessary, using the helicopter's noise and rotor-wash as partial cover. Reaper moved like a phantom through the chaos, each shot eliminating a threat before it could strike. Insurgents fell one by one, confused, panicked, and demoralized. Hayes realized the sniper was now actively securing the perimeter for extraction, clearing lines of fire and creating a lethal corridor of safety. Lane glanced at Hayes, awestruck. "Sir, he's incredible. I don't even see him, but every shot counts." Hayes nodded, voice low. "That's the difference between life and death, son. That's the difference between making it home and becoming a statistic." The helicopters landed, dust swirling, blades slicing through the air. Hayes counted the seconds, aware that every delay increased risk. The SEALs sprinted across the clearing, bullets kicking up sand around them. Reaper's rifle fired intermittently, precise, deadly, and unseen. As they reached the first helicopter, Nash helped Falcon aboard, while Hayes and the team followed. Carter secured the rear, watching for any threat. The rotors lifted the dust into blinding clouds, obscuring vision, but the SEALs were safe, at least for the moment. Reaper's final shots struck the remaining insurgents, attempting to approach the clearing, eliminating them with lethal precision. Hayes glanced back instinctively, wanting to see the sniper who had saved their lives. But there was nothing, no sign, no movement, no trace. Only the aftermath, the bodies of the enemy, the chaos cleared, and the phantom who had turned night into survival. The helicopters lifted off, rotors chopping through the desert air. Hayes pressed himself into the seat, heart still hammering, sweat and dust mingling on his face. Lane, Ortiz, Nash, Carter, and Falcon did the same, silent but aware of the miraculous luck or skill that had brought them this far. Falcon whispered, voice trembling, He really saved us." "Yes," Hayes replied quietly, "and we won't forget it." As the helicopters carried Echo 6 away from the battlefield, the desert fell silent again. The ruins lay empty, smoke curling from abandoned vehicles, the scorched earth a testament to the night's violence. Somewhere among the ruins, a lone figure moved Reaper, the ghost sniper, watching, disappearing, and unseen. He had completed his mission, saved lives, manipulated the battlefield, and vanished before anyone could acknowledge him. Hayes allowed himself a moment to breathe. They were alive. They were going home. But he couldn't shake the image of the phantom sniper, the silent hunter whose bullets had kept them breathing through the deadliest hours. "Sir," Ortiz said softly, Do we ever find him?" Hayes shook his head. "Maybe, maybe not. But he's out there, watching, protecting. That's enough for now." The team remained silent, each lost in thought, reflecting on the deadly night, the fear, the chaos, and the miracle of survival. Every second had counted. Every shot had mattered. And every one of them owed their lives to a man they had never met, a soldier whose face they would never see, whose name they would only remember as Reaper. The helicopters lifted higher, carrying Echo 6 toward safety, toward home, away from the ruins, away from the night that had nearly claimed them. Yet in the minds of every SEAL aboard, the phantom sniper lingered the shadow who had guided them, hunted their enemies, and ensured their survival. Hayes exhaled slowly, leaning back in his seat. "We survived because of him. That's all we need to know." As the desert stretched beneath them, the first real light of day illuminating the sand and stone, The SEALs of Echo 6 knew one thing with absolute certainty. They had witnessed something extraordinary. Someone, a ghost in the ruins, had fought alongside them, unseen, lethal, unstoppable. And because of him, they lived to fight another day. The extraction was complete, but the story of the night, the ambush, the terror, and the unseen savior would remain with them forever. The memory of Reaper, the sniper who had broken the silence of the night, would never fade. The sun had fully risen over the Afghan desert, burning away the chill of night and casting the battlefield in harsh light. Echo 6 sat in the extraction helicopters, heads bowed, minds racing, hearts still pounding from the harrowing events of the previous hours. They were alive, battered, bloodied, but alive and all because of one unseen soldier who had turned the tide, Reaper. Hayes stared out at the desert below, remembering the chaos, the ambush, and the impossible odds they had faced. Every step, every breath, every bullet had counted. And yet, the thread of hope that had guided them through the darkness had come from a single source, a ghostly figure whose identity remained unknown. Lane broke the silence, voice rough. "Sir, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. He saved us all." Hayes nodded slowly, exhaustion and awe mingling on his face. We were pinned down, outnumbered, and hopeless. And yet, someone answered our SOS when no one else would. That's what saved us. Ortiz, still pale from fear and fatigue, whispered, "But who is he? Why help us?" "We don't even know him." Hayes allowed himself a small, grim smile. Sometimes it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why or who. What matters is what he did. And that we'll never forget. Falcon, sitting quietly beside Nash, spoke softly, almost in awe. He's like a ghost. A guardian. Protecting us. "Yes," Nash replied, voice steady but reverent. "That's exactly what he was. And he'll always be with us, even if we never see him again." The helicopters carried Echo 6 to a safe zone, away from the ruins, away from the desert that had almost claimed them. Yet as they approached the forward operating base, each SEAL knew the story of the night. The terror, the precision, the phantom sniper would stay with them forever. Every scar, every bruise, every memory of that deadly night was tied to the presence of a man who existed in the shadows, invisible yet unmistakable in impact. Back at the base, debriefing rooms buzzed with controlled chaos. Medics worked on wounds, radios crackled with routine reports, and officers attempted to piece together the night's events. Hayes and his team recounted the ambush, the exhaustion, and the impossibility of survival, always returning to the same point, the sniper. "Who was covering your extraction?" a commander asked. Hayes shook his head. "We don't know. He never identified himself. But he was there, everywhere at once, picking off threats, covering our movements. It was like he was a ghost." The commander raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident. "A ghost?" Hayes' jaw tightened. "Call him what you will, but without him, Echo 6 wouldn't be alive. And that's a fact." Word of the ambush spread quickly through the ranks, whispers of a phantom sniper, a shadow who had turned the tide of battle. Soldiers spoke in hushed tones, all mixed with disbelief, as if recounting a story that sounded too extraordinary to be true. Yet those who had witnessed it knew the truth. Reaper had saved them all. That night, Hayes sat alone in the tent, replaying every moment in his mind, the crackle of bullets, the screams of insurgents, the unseen rifle that had protected them. He thought of Reaper, moving silently through ruins, striking precisely, vanishing without a trace. Who was he? Why had he appeared? And would they ever know? The questions had no answers, and perhaps that was part of the legend. Reaper was not there for glory, not for recognition. He existed in the shadows, a guardian, a lethal force that appeared only when needed and disappeared before thanks could be given. Over the following days, Echo 6 recovered physically, but the memory of that night remained vivid. Every man carried the weight of what had happened, and every story they told included the phantom sniper who had saved their lives. Reaper had become more than a soldier. He was a symbol, a story, a reminder of the unseen forces that could shape survival in war. Hayes often found himself staring into the distance, imagining the sniper moving through the desert, watching, protecting. He imagined Reaper as a force of nature untouchable, precise, unstoppable. The SEALs spoke of him often, not just as a warrior, but as a legend, the man who had broken the night's silence and ensured their survival. In the quiet moments, Hayes reflected on the meaning of courage and sacrifice. Reaper had acted without orders, without acknowledgement, and without the promise of recognition. He had intervened solely to protect lives. That selflessness, that lethal precision, that unwavering resolve, that was the essence of true heroism. The story of Echo 6's ambush spread through the military, but details of Reaper remained elusive. Some speculated he was part of an elite unit, a covert operative sent to assist in an unseen capacity. Others whispered that he was a lone sniper, an independent guardian, moving through war zones as a force for survival. No one knew for certain. And perhaps that was how it was meant to be. Hayes stood on the base's perimeter one evening, looking at the desert horizon. The memory of the night still burned bright, the fear, the chaos, the relief, and the phantom presence that had turned the tide. He whispered a quiet thanks into the wind, knowing it would never reach Reaper, but feeling that the acknowledgement mattered nonetheless. The legacy of Reaper was not just survival. It was a reminder of the unseen forces that could intervene in moments of despair. The silent protectors whose names would never appear in reports, but whose actions would echo through the lives they saved. For Echo 6, the sniper had become more than a soldier. He had become a ghostly legend, immortalized in their memory. Even as the base returned to routine, and the war continued in distant regions, the story of the ambush and the ghost sniper lingered. Every soldier who heard the tale felt a chill, a mixture of awe and gratitude. The desert had claimed many lives, but some knights, some warriors, existed beyond fear, beyond recognition, beyond mortality. Hayes often thought of Reaper, moving silently across deserts, ruins, and battlefields. He imagined him perched on some distant ridge, scanning the horizon, waiting for the moment when he would be needed again. The sniper's presence was eternal in their memory, a guardian of the night, unseen but decisive, lethal but selfless. Echo 6 had survived against impossible odds. They owed their lives to the sniper who had broken the night's silence. And though they may never know his identity, his face, or his name, they would carry the legend of Reaper forever, a reminder that in the darkest hours, heroes can emerge from the shadows. Unseen, unstoppable, and unforgettable. As night fell over the desert once more, Hayes gazed into the horizon. Somewhere, Reaper was out there, a ghost in the ruins, a silent guardian of those who could not save themselves. And for Echo 6, the story of that night, of survival against impossible odds, and of the sniper who had changed everything, would never be forgotten. The desert was quiet. The sand shimmered in moonlight. And somewhere in the shadows, Reaper watched, waiting, ready to intervene again. The legend lived on,